Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's edition of Sow the Land, presented by M for MM. Minorities Medical Marijuana is a 501c3 nonprofit that is located in over 25 different states and the Caribbean. We have a plethora of programming that includes our Clean Slate program, our procurement program, and even our expungement and medical patient clinic. Today's program is Sow the Land. My name is Stanley Atkins II. I am your National Director of Hemp Farming and Technology. We took some time off to kind of revamp, and we're back, and we've got an exciting guest for you today. You see, at M4MM, not only are we an organization, we're also a team, we're a tribe, but we're even family. And today's guest is a special brother of mine. We've known each other for many years, and we actually met through M4MM. It seems that for some conferences and some times where, we shared accommodations, it's always something that happens. But remember, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But a little bit of background about CJ. CJ is from Louisville, Kentucky. And he taught me that it's not Louisville, because I'm from the South. We say Louisville. He's like, no, it's Louisville. He hails from Louisville, Kentucky. He is a father of two. He's a barber, but he has now transitioned into the industrial hemp and medical cannabis industry. CJ hails as our Kentucky State Director for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. His current work includes working down with legislators at the State House on medical cannabis bills, proposals for medical cannabis, but he also sits on the board for hemp, and that's what brings him on today. Now, I know you're probably wondering, Kentucky, hemp, M for MM, the Canamatic, Georgia, how does all this tie in? Well, we're going to tie all this in for you. Since CJ transitioned to this industry, he has created two entities. The first being Commercial Realty. Well, you have to understand that the cannabis industry is a real estate industry. Why is that? Well, think about it like this. No matter what business you want to have, you have to have a place to grow it. You have to have a place to dry it and process it. You have to have a place to package it. You have to have a place to store it. You have to have a place to sell it. And that is why the cannabis industry is a real estate industry. And as CJ saw the transition and the innovations and the big changes coming to industrial hemp, he created Hemp Forward. And that's what we're here today to talk about. And without further ado, I'd like to bring to you Mr. CJ Carter. CJ, what's going on, man?
What's going on, my brother? You doing all right?
Man, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me
Did you hear
all the
me?
way from loud and clear. Thank you for joining me from Kentucky, man. So I know that things have been rapidly moving up there. Industrial hemp, medical cannabis.
Yeah.
The bluegrass state. When I think Kentucky, I think music. I think lots of grass, but I don't necessarily think agriculture until I got into the industrial hemp space. So we've talked a little bit about you, but what I want to know is, as it pertains to hemp, we both know that the 2018 federal farm bill made hemp cultivation and processing legal in the United States. This means that an entire industry was emerging. So what is one of the driving factors that attracted you into the industrial hemp space?
Well, first off, I appreciate the opportunity, Stan, to get me on this show to kind of share my story and where I stand here in the great bluegrass state of Kentucky. But I think one of my main driving forces that attracted me to this space, I think the first thing is my ambition. I'm a patient, I'm an advocate, as well as an entrepreneur. On the marijuana side of things, my first time smoking it was at my eighth grade graduation party. Funny story behind that. Yeah, was over my friend's house, and she had came across some marijuana, some weed, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do with this. So we end up, running around her house trying to find something to roll up, our weed with. And we ended up in her bathroom where she reaches down into the trash can and pulls out a tampon wrapper. So
Okay.
the first joint I ever smoked in my life was rolled in a tampon.
Equal
So
opportunity
that
smoker.
started in the eighth grade, and so that was my eighth grade year, moving up until the summer of 2018. I had quit cold turkey, trying to save my marriage. My
Mhm.
ex-wife hated the fact that I smoked. She would always say, "You have a better relationship with Mary Jane than you do with me." And I would tell her, "Because you're stressing me out." So I quit cold turkey. And then
Okay.
2 weeks after I quit, it was June 19th, 2018. I had the first seizure of my life. 2 weeks after that, I had another seizure. And then a few weeks after that, I had another seizure. So I got to the point where I was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. So a year after my diagnosis, my ex-wife then filed for divorce. So these last 5 years of my life have been crazy. I've had a lot of extreme lows. I've been in a dark place. But luckily, my ambition is what brought me out of that. I'm a single dad, as you said, of two amazing young men. They're 8 and 3. The unfortunate thing is, being that I have epilepsy, I have a pre-existing condition. So I'm unable to get any more life insurance. So my
Wow.
two boys are my fuel, that light my fire, and it's my ambition that led me into the industrial hemp space. Because that's one of the great things about the cannabis space is it's a brand new industry that's in its infancy, and you can come in, identify a void, then fill that void, and then as long as you're consistent and persistent, you can create anything it is that you want in this space. And that's my plan to create um, ventures where I will be able to retire my boys, where they won't need any life insurance. I can be able to leave them with a legacy with the work that I'm doing.
Wow. So that's what one thing I love about you, man, is you're genuine. And you and I, we have similar backgrounds to where at the end of the day, outside of business, outside of industrial hemp, we're patients. And I think
Mhm.
that for people like yourself and me, that keeps us humble. Because we aren't allowed to get confident, we aren't allowed to get cocky, we're never allowed to get arrogant because we may have days to where we're not even physically able to do our job. We're not physically able to even go to the Capitol to advocate. So, man, I definitely appreciate you.
Mhm.
I know you've been dealing with a lot here recently. I continue to send my love and condolences to you and your family. And that leads us into the next question. So, you got into it because you have a passion for it. Like you said, you're driven, you're an entrepreneur, and you're in Kentucky. So now we know that Kentucky is one of the most fertile states in our nation for agriculture.
Mhm.
In the grand view of this emerging industry, why could Kentucky become one of the key regions for industrial hemp?
I mean, you said it in a nutshell. I call Kentucky the fertile crescent of cannabis, or I also refer to it as the breadbasket of cannabis.
Okay.
Kentucky, unlike any state in the country, we have a long and storied past as it relates to hemp. At one point in time, through the early 1900s, Kentucky produced 90% of the nation's hemp. And of course, that was all done on the back of slave labor. The thing about Kentucky, Kentucky wasn't a plantation state. Yet and still, in the year 1850, there were 250,000 slaves here in Kentucky. Today, Kentucky, we're about the same size of Oregon, where we have about 4.5 million people here in the state. And as of last year, in the state of Kentucky, there were 370,000 Black folks here in Kentucky. So if you just put your thinking cap on and you connect the dots from 1850, when there were 250,000, until today, where there's 370,000, a lot of the people who live here in Kentucky, especially amongst Black folk, haven't yet connected those dots to see that they actually have a direct tie to when here in Kentucky they refer to hemp as the nigger crop. That's what they called it throughout slavery, because it was very dirty, it was very laborious, and it was all done on the back of slave labor, where the hemp that was cultivated and processed. It was processed into the bags that housed all the cotton from the South. All of that was done here in Kentucky. And outside of that, our hemp demographics, as I like to say, place us above every other place in the world. We have limestone in our soil, which enriches every crop with magnesium and calcium. That's why barley, wheat, corn, soybeans are so big here. That's why bourbon is so big, because of the magnesium and the limestone that's actually in the soil. Then we also have a fresh water source from Mammoth Cave. And then on top of that, we have the ideal location. UPS is headquartered here because you can get anywhere in the United States, north, south, east, or west, here in Kentucky. We are our prime location. Our weather is perfect for harvest. And, this has a lot to do with the reason why I consider Kentucky the epicenter for, both marijuana and hemp. Because of who we are as Kentucky. A lot of people aren't familiar with the history, but I think that's why I am here. I think that's a lot of my purpose, is to share the history that Kentucky has, so that we can then, better position ourselves as a state, to be an economic force as it relates to both marijuana and hemp.
Wow. Um, just when I think I know about hemp and I think I know about agriculture, we have these conversations and you really drop stuff on me like that. And I did know the history of industrial hemp in this country. I know that, back in the day, there were pieces of money that were printed, and you could see them harvesting it with a donkey on the front, but the money was made of hemp. A lot of countries have even paid taxes with hemp. So it sounds to me like it's almost set up perfectly, logistically, climate wise, resource wise. You've got your fertile land, you've got your water, you've got your direction north, south, east, west. Looks like to me we just need the program in there.
Yeah, need programming and infrastructure. That's one thing that's actually missing in the space. Everyone has ideas, everyone has business plans, but the unfortunate thing is there's not enough capital and not enough infrastructure, to really, give the industry some legs in order for it to really flourish and to really able to provide that economic development, for the whole entire space.
So now that's what takes me. You say this space, and there's enough room for everybody. And I know that you've
Yeah.
been carving out your space up there in Kentucky. I've been watching you. We've been following your work. So now tell me about your current work with Hemp Forward, and how did you come up with that idea, and what were your first steps to even putting this into action, brother?
So yeah, as I said, I've been in the cannabis space as a whole since about 2015. My brother actually introduced me into the space. He was living in Colorado at the time, and he was involved in their caregiver model. So with me being and having that much experience in the space, as a patient, an advocate and an entrepreneur, I've been able to identify voids in the space. And I've been able to come up with ideas that will allow me to forward, is a visionary venture, aimed at revolutionizing sustainable product development in the industrial hemp space. I plan on setting up Hemp Forward first off as an initiative, that promotes the eco-friendliness of industrial hemp, where I'm striving to drive positive change in the various sectors associated with industrial hemp, while also offering um, customers as well as communities, municipalities, and states with innovative and sustainable solutions as it relates to hemp. So my vision associated with Hemp Forward was to create a world where sustainable practices are at the forefront of every industry. We know that industrial hemp is a industry destabilizer, which is why the plant has been illegal for so long. But what I'm actually interested in doing is trying to develop sustainable practices as well as products, as I said, that inspire that positive change. So the first program and initiative that I'm looking to do with Hemp Forward is to establish a industrial hemp remediation project that embraces the power of nature, to heal contaminated brownfield properties here in the city of Louisville. Here in Louisville, there are around 150 brownfield properties. And for those people who don't know, a brownfield property is an old manufacturing facility or a property from a former like paint company or from a chemical company, where these properties are now contaminated with chemicals in their soils. So they are classified as brownfield properties, and they're typically underdeveloped. They're they're dilapidated. They're old. They have old buildings, and they're pretty much eyesores that just sit there. So what industrial hemp allows you to do is once you plant the seed, you plant the crop, it actually remediates the soil by, hemp has a deep root structure. So the roots actually gather up the actual contaminants and the chemicals in the soil and bring them up to their stock. So depending on the actual chemical, it can take as less as 30 days to remediate the soil. And then, depending on the actual toxicity, of course, that time frame will increase. So based off of this remediation project here in the city of Louisville, I'm looking to turn these brownfield properties into thriving ecological havens, or as I say, vibrant community spaces. And we're looking to place Louisville at the forefront where we're able to transform these contaminated lands and transform them into symbols of like sustainability and hope. And then, with the goal of actually reconnecting our people with nature. That's what I'm really trying to do with this Hemp Forward initiative. Of course, there are some growth plans associated with the actual initiative, but we're looking to start with the industrial hemp remediation project, where we can get the city of Louisville to embrace these sustainability practices. And by doing that, we're looking to foster economic growth. But then more than that, we're looking to enhance the community well-being by making Louisville a model city for innovation and urban development.
I love it. You said you hit on some key things, and one of those key things is remediation. If you're listening and you heard him use the term remediation, and for anyone who may not know what remediation is, let's say you have a swimming pool that haven't been serviced for 3 years. It's got algae, it's got leaves, it's got mold in it, and you want to clean that pool up. So you put in the chemicals and you put in a pump and a filter. You're doing that to remediate the water. So what CJ is telling you is that hemp has the ability to remediate its environment. And this could be key because if you look at right now, natural disasters from oil spills to even contamination from nuclear waste. I was reading something during the pandemic about a small research project near Chernobyl in the Ukraine, where, if you may remember, in 1988, they had a nuclear meltdown. So overnight, the entire city and the entire region had to be abandoned for the next 1,000 years. Anything that's there gets cancer and dies. The animals that continue to live there have potentially been genetically mutated due to the radiation. So what they started doing was testing out the theory of land remediation by planting hemp crops. The way you test it, so if CJ is remediating a body of water, he's remediating soil around an old factory, what we would do is we would take initial samples. He said, it can potentially begin to remediate within 30 days. Now, we're not saying after 30 days, the ground's going to be perfect. No, but you could potentially see a reduction in what we call the ppm. And what that stands for is the parts per million. So for a specific amount of dirt, how many particles of contaminants per million units of weight did you find? And so this is going to be key, CJ. I think one of the ways we're going to see this used probably sooner than later is for stagnant bodies of water that are receiving a lot of runoff from pesticides, golf courses, because they're finding the forever chemicals in your water supply. So those forever chemicals that they're finding in medications and things of that nature, there's pilot programs that we could potentially, see if we could remediate some of that. And I love that you're even thinking that way, CJ, because reducing the harm to our environment is key as we move this industry forward. We need to reduce our carbon footprint. The earth is heating up, and the industrial hemp plant is good at sequestering carbon, even in the environment. So now that leads me directly into the Kentucky work. Now we know the industrial hemp ties
And
directly
that's
into.
exactly the beginning point.
I mean, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and finish. I
Yep, can
seem
you
like
hear
I
me,
got a
Stan?
little lag. Yeah, it seems like I have a little lag on my end. But what I was tying it into is we know that hemp ties directly into agriculture and politics. You've been in that Capitol State House enough
Yep.
times. What can you tell us about the legislative process in Kentucky, and how does the legislative process in Kentucky even have anything to do with hemp or cannabis?
See, the funny thing about our legislative process here in Kentucky is we operate, differently than a lot of other states in the union. Our legislative days are relatively short. On an odd year like we just had here in 2023, our legislative session was only 30 days, which starts at the beginning of January. Then on even years, so next year for 2024, we'll have a 60-day session. So typically, when it's a short session, a 30-day session, anything that's revenue generating typically doesn't pass in our legislature. Luckily, this past session we did pass medical marijuana. Even though the bill is a little bit lackluster, it doesn't, cater per se to patients due to the fact that flower is not allowed, home grows aren't allowed. Where the Republicans here in the state, they pound their chest saying that here in Kentucky we have the most relegated and the most complex and legislation that doesn't allow us to do much. It's very restrictive, and Republicans are happy of that fact. But our legislative process is very in the 3.5 years that I've been doing lobby work with M4MM. It's extremely tough, being that Kentucky is a majority red state. Even though we have a Democratic governor, our legislator is Republican controlled on both the House and on the Senate side. So the thing about Kentucky being a red state, very conservative, and it's very religious. Within our legislature, there are 138 legislators, and well over 100 are Republicans. And within that Republican contingent, there's a group of about 19 or 20 legislators that are reverends, they're pastors, they're ministers of churches. So nothing here in the state of Kentucky gets passed if it doesn't go through this group of 20 legislators. So luckily, with the pressure of the governor, it kind of forced their hands and put their feet to the fire to actually do something as it relates to medical marijuana. Now, on the hemp side, it's a little bit different story. This is the home of Mitch McConnell. I call him the most powerful man in politics. He's been there dang near my whole life. So he's the one who implemented the Farm Bill and legalized hemp in 2018. The unfortunate thing associated with that legalization of hemp, it seems to me as if it was somewhat smoke and mirrors, even though it was legalized. There was nothing to back that legalization in terms of setting up an economy and an ecosystem around the hemp plant. Because we all know that hemp can be, processed and developed into 25,000 different things, but there's no backing to even start the process to get hemp up to that point where it can be able to, provide these industries at scale with the amount of biomass that they would need to be able to process and manufacture. So, that's where I'm at with it, is trying to get the legislators on board and in line with, we have a huge opportunity here in the state of Kentucky to position ourselves at the forefront and become the blueprint of this multi-billion-dollar industry, both on the marijuana side as well as on the hemp side. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of the legislators here in Kentucky, they claim to have never touched the plant. They claim to have never smoked the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And my rebuttal to that is, if you've never touched the plant, if you've never smoked the plant, if you have no experience with the plant, then how do you in turn determine that you're going to be able to develop an industry? And for me, uh, I tell them that you have no experience, so you pretty much don't know what you're doing in trying to set up an industry, which is why we're in the position that we're in, where we're late to the party, we're behind the lines, and we're
Mm-hmm.
literally dropping the bag. We're losing the opportunity that's been presented to us here in the state of Kentucky. So, that's why I do the work that I do in trying to be, a community ambassador, trying to, educate people, of, hemp and of marijuana here in the state of Kentucky. So we can start at the grassroots level. We can then move up to the local, state, and then federal level here in the state of Kentucky. But we first have to have an educated citizenry before we can even make any forward steps. And that all starts with the legislative process, because we know that our legislation dictates business, and business, dictates the actual marketplace. So it all starts with the legislative process, which is, where we start at the grassroots level.
That was a lot of information, y'all, but it was all important. Um, CJ is really he's getting the front of the headline privilege, because right now a lot of the things that he's speaking to, this isn't hypotheticals. These are facts. These are based on honest thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So I know that there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different areas of this industry. There's a lot of moving parts to this system as well, or machine that we call the cannabis and hemp industry. Just really quick, what are the like three of the hurdles that you have seen just from even becoming an advocate to where you sit today on here live with me? What are like three of the biggest hurdles that you've seen, so that maybe someone who's watching this, they may have a solution to help us, they may have resources? How can what are some of the hurdles that other people can be looking out for states who may be where Kentucky is, or may even be in Kentucky?
Well, I think one of the first major hurdle that anyone faces when entering the cannabis space, both on the marijuana and on the hemp side, is, the cannabis space as a whole is a space about self education. You have to be a student when you enter this space, and you have to be able to, out of the 168 hours in a week, you have to be able to delegate, a portion of your week where you actually study the space. I consider myself a student, and I get a lot of things wrong, based off of the study that I have. But the second hurdle, I would say, is actually coming out of your silo where you're trying to do the idea or the business that you're doing, where you can actually come to people who are, in the same lane that you're in, coming out of that silo, and then out of what you're doing, with an individual or with a company. The way that hemp is it's unfortunate where, there's a lot of snakes that have come in and take advantage of you, because, you didn't know. So it's kind of but you have to study it, what is where you can help the neighborhood. It takes a lot in terms of what you're doing, and that's where I'm at with crazy on what it is. And and in terms of coming up to people and having programs and talking to them about what can actually happen, that's where it really is. Like, industrial hemp can really create a brand new economy, here in Kentucky, not just in Louisville, but say in Bowling Green, or in Lexington, or in Pikeville, or in Ashland, or in Paducah, or in Murray. The whole entire state can be in this melting pot of this brand new multi-billion-dollar economy. And you have to be a student, you have to trust, and you have to collaborate with like-minded people, because it's not easy. As I said, this is a brand new industry that's in its infancy. It's a baby right now. It's just now, learning to crawl. It hasn't even started to walk yet, because there is no infrastructure. But that's when
Yeah,
we come together,
yeah.
people like me and you, and like Roz, like Eric, like the M4M organization, the Kentucky
Both
Hemp
Eric.
Association, where I'm like president. Yeah, where we can all come together, and we can begin to collaborate, and we can begin to build the industry as we see fit, in order to provide a future, that's going to provide, the United States with huge economic development.
Man, you are really putting it on us today, CJ. Man, just really want to thank you again because all of the information, if things that people are wondering, they just don't know. And when they read an article, a blog post, or watch the news, the news is going to give you an excerpt. You've been interviewed enough on the news. I have as well, to where they may record 25, 30 minutes of content and show 15-second clip. So, a lot of these
Yep.
working parts, these moving pieces, it ain't this isn't the fun part of the industry, y'all. Yes, when we go out to the farms and we're at dispensaries, it's exciting. We have a good time, networking at the conferences. But this is the boring part. This is the nuts, bolts, hammers, nails, and thumbtacks of it all. And if you don't know the rules, you don't know how to play. Um, there's a famous basketball player who, for a few, you may have heard of him. He was known as the Black Mamba, Kobe Bryant.
Mm.
And I was watching an interview with Kobe Bryant one day, and I really took this into my work and some of the things I do, just trying to develop a part of that Mamba mentality. I ain't got to have the whole thing, just give me a sliver of it. And what he said that he does is in the off season, every sport, they write new rules, they amend rules, they change rules, just like in the legislation. Kobe Bryant said every summer when he got the new rule book, no player ever reads it. He read it from cover to cover. He said he knew at what point he could hold someone's jersey because he knew what parts of the floor the refs had to be on. Was that cheating? No. Did it provide a competitive advantage? Yes. They do the same thing in politics all the time. So really knowing the rules, the ins, the outs, the offenses, the commendations of your said game, and in this game, we're trying to choose agricultural hemp, industrial hemp. That's where we are. And we really didn't get to all the questions, but this next one we got to get to because you mentioned it, CJ. I wasn't gonna bring it up. I let CJ Carter bring it up. About tens of thousands of applications. All right, industrial hemp. Everything that I see in that room behind you can be some form of it be made from hemp. Everything in this room, from this chair that I'm sitting on to this tablet that I'm writing on, everything can be made from industrial hemp. So, what are some of the innovative, practical applications that you see potentially emerging in this industry? But how does the supply chain management affect that? And as you said, the infrastructure. So, I know we can make all these things. What are some of the things that you can see potentially coming? But what is the problem with the supply chain that's preventing it from happening?
Well, one of the first things that I see happening is first off is sustainable farming practices. Especially when it comes to hemp, because we know that hemp has a natural pest resistant properties. Where it can reduce chemical pesticides by minimizing the harm to the actual beneficial insects and to the actual ecosystem. And, with hemp also, it requires less water to compare to other crops, which make it a lot more efficient option in terms of like water scarce regions where they're actually hemp can actually reduce the strain on local water resources. And then of course with the deep root structure that I talked about a little bit earlier, how that can prevent the soil erosion and can actually promote soil structure. So that's the first thing that I would like to see, and the thing that I kind of see happening is the sustainable farming practices that are associated with that. As far as trends in terms of where I see the space actually moving, that the United States Residential Building Code just added industrial hemp to the code where you can now begin the process of building houses out of hemp. And we know, me and you know, that you can build a whole entire house out of hemp, from the concrete to the framing, to the insulation, to the roofing, to the flooring, to the molding.
Yep.
They say with hemp, you can hammer it, you can mold it, you can do pretty much anything with it. So in terms of home construction, I think to me that is a huge new portion of the industry where we can see immense size and growth. The only unfortunate thing is we need more processors. There aren't too many processors here in the United States. I think it's probably right around 20, 25 processors in the whole entire country, and that's nowhere near enough to begin to process and manufacture, the hemp into the car parts or into the home construction materials, and then potentially into car parts. They're already doing it over in Europe where they're processing and manufacturing the industrial hemp into the various car parts,
Mm-hmm.
interior door panels, into dashboards, into the fiberglass, into moldings and holdings of, say, the battery, whatever the case may be. So another space that I see a lot of growth is in the animal bedding. And I only mention animal bedding because here in Kentucky, we're the home of Churchill Downs, uh, one of the largest, horse races in the world. And we have a very huge horse and equine ecosystem here in the state. So animal bedding has been something that's been proven to be a lot more water absorbent. It's a lot more efficient in terms of being cost effective versus, using regular mulch or other animal bedding prospects. So that's where I see specifically here in the state of Kentucky is, with the animal bedding, the home construction materials, and then the automotive industry. Here in Kentucky, we have three car manufacturers. We have Toyota, we have Ford, and then we have Corvette. So the potential of getting letters of commitment from these car manufacturers to possibly provide the necessary infrastructure to start the process of getting farmers a little bit more comfortable with growing hemp again, because we knew what happened with CBD, how it burnt a lot of farmers, and a lot of farmers were stuck with thousands upon thousands of pounds of biomass not being able to do anything with, because there wasn't any real demand. There was a lot of perceived demand around the crop. So that's the first thing that needs to happen is we need to rebuild the farmer confidence in the hemp plant before we can even get to the sustainable farming practices, before we can even begin to develop more processing plants and manufacturing facilities to then begin to supply the animal bedding industry, the home construction industry, and then the automotive industry. So that's kind of some of the changes and trends that I see. All of those are particular to Kentucky because this is where I call home. And as I said earlier, we have a huge opportunity here in the state of Kentucky. And, I can't allow on my watch for us to lose out on this opportunity and to drop the bag as it relates to positioning, the Commonwealth at the forefront of this industry.
I love it, CJ. You're really bringing a wealth of information. I'm over here taking down some of your key points. And I see we got a question here from CJ Dunford, and it says, "What can supporters do in reference to legislation to support the changes needed for infrastructure implementation?" Thank you for your question, CJ Dunford. The first thing that I would like to highly recommend, and we tell this to everyone, know who your local elected officials are. Start there. Find out who
Mhm.
your state elected officials are. Find out who your national, congressional elected officials are. You can email them. Find out their stance on cannabis, on industrial hemp, on building construction, alt materials, as they say, which are alternative materials. That's the first way. The second way is once you know who these people are, know the rules, but know the game. CJ knows when their legislative session starts. He knows when it ends. Here in Georgia, ours is different. Every state varies. Here in Georgia, ours is roughly 100 days. So from the second week of January to the first week of April, that's it for the entire year. And as he stated, on the short years or after a certain period during that session, if it hasn't made it to a certain point in the process, it's not going to happen. So definitely staying abreast of what bills are being proposed in your state. They're usually available online. They're public record. Here in Georgia, I think it's ga.legis.gov slash like House Assembly or something of that nature. And I hope that answers your questions, CJ Dunford. And in response to you, Mr. Carter, you hit it, man. Housing. Big shout out to the U.S. Hemp Building Association, Jacob Waddell and his team, and a lot of different organizations that have been really working on this. Shout out to MCBA, NCIA, all the different organizations, M for MM, who have been working on this. I have the lane that I'm carving for myself. Everybody has it, but it's all going to come down to us working together and having processors. If when you processing this, yes, we can grow it, but we need enough people growing it. And I think that is my number one focus in this role with M for MM is to re-engage with the farmers and reinstill that confidence. Because yes, 2018, 2019, they all jumped in. A lot of them took things on consignment or on credit. The genetics, the nutrients, they didn't even know. They bought tens of some hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff to grow. They grew it, but they didn't have a buyer for the end use product, or processors were overwhelmed, and their flour, which is their actual hemp buds, it sat and deteriorated in tri-wall boxes, the big thick cardboard boxes. They're in shipping containers, super sacks. And so now we're having to go out to the same farmers who were convinced by a lot of these fast talking salesmen and saleswomen that now, hey, we know we told you to grow hemp, it didn't work, you're $118,000 in debt, but wait, we want you to grow hemp again. All right, but check it out. It's going to be a lot cheaper this time. You're not going to be paying $1.25 a seed. We may get the seed for 1 cent or 2 cents. You're not going to have to spend as much money on manpower actually touching it, manicuring the plants, because we want it tall, stringy, and ugly. We want strong hemp. So what CJ is saying is that we're going to see hemp buildings. And with energy costs, especially here in the South, rising and skyrocketing, people are looking for alternatives. They're trying to reduce the carbon footprint on the world. We are killing Mother Nature. Now hemp could potentially be used to heal Mother Nature. CJ, I'll definitely want to come up there, pay you a visit soon. We've got some work ahead of us. I've got several hemp projects I'm taking on. Recently got on board with a new one this week. But ladies and gentlemen, it's coming. So if you look at the major industry, companies and brands in any industry, I mean, think about Kraft, think about DuPont, think about AT&T. Something a lot of people may not know is AT&T holds, I want to say, the most patents out of any corporation. Now, whether they, act upon those patents and put it out, that's to be said, but they hold it. And so we look at these major companies like your Clorox and again, your DuPonts, and we're like, well, how did they get that? That's generational wealth. Everybody, that's generational wealth, man. I'm trying to create generational wealth, but you almost point at generational wealth like it's a bad generational wealth. Yeah. We're going to create it because those last names that's on your tools, Stanley and things of that nature, this is how you can come together in your area because we need more processors. I'm from the deep South. My hometown of Griffin, Georgia, was known for textile mills. There were over 15, 20 textile mills. Recently, don't think there are any more that are actively producing textiles because in the early 2000s, they all shut down, moved to Mexico and China. The buildings are still there. The way you process hemp is similar to the way you can process cotton, depending on what you're doing it for. So come on, man, because between you and I, CJ, in the words of Outkast, when it comes to this industrial hemp, I think the South got something to say, my brother.
Yes, facts.
So
Yeah,
before we
that
get
is
out of
facts, man.
here,
It definitely is, man.
CJ, again, my brother, man, I genuinely thank you. It's always a pleasure whenever we connect. Since the first time we ever met, it's always just flowed. It's always good energy, good vibes, maybe a good laugh or two. Someone may get excited and somebody may end up dejected. Who knows? But tell all the viewers how they can follow you. Let them know where they can contact you for more information. And make sure you tell them about your social media and how they can reach out and stay in touch with Commercial Realty and Hemp Forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Stan. As you said, man, you're definitely my brother in the space. We go way back, and I always say we down like 4 flats on the Cadillac. You feel me? But yeah, you can find me. As Stan stated earlier, my first love is I'm a barber or I'm a tonsorial artist. So I have 2 barbershops here in the city of Louisville. one that's not too far from Churchill Downs, and the other barbershop is in Newburgh Middle School, where I'm actually able to every Monday mentor the young men. So throughout the year, I could probably get about 30 to 35 students that I give consistent haircuts to, where I'm able to mentor them. So my first social media is CJ Tonsurial for my barber services, and that's CJTONSORIAL. So I've kind of reached my ceiling as it relates to barbering, because there's only, 10 to 12 workable hours in the day as a barber. So standing on my feet and using my hands to cut hair, and I've reached a ceiling with that, which is why I've transitioned over to cannabis. And I founded the Commercial Realty Group, which is a full service cannabis commercial real estate agency with Coldwell Banker McMahon. So you can follow me at Commercial Realty on IG and on Facebook, and that's spelled CANNAMERCIALREALTY, and that's Commercial Realty. So, and also, as Stan said, I'm the Kentucky State Director of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and you can follow us on at M4MMKY, and that's M4, the number 4, MMKY on Instagram.
Again, CJ, man, thank you so much. We're going to have to run this one back this fall, because between now and then, there's going to be some significant changes. And, I've got some big announcements to make soon. We've got some things coming into fruition with some collaborative efforts with other organizations surrounding hemp. So definitely stay tuned. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Sow the Land, brought to you by Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. M for MM United on Instagram, Minorities for Medical Marijuana on Facebook, LinkedIn. Make sure you click like, subscribe, and it never hurts to share. If we covered something today that you would like more information on, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is at the bottom of the screen, and if you don't see it, it is Stanley at m4mmunited.org. Please stay tuned. We've got a lot more programming come up. We've got Sow the Land coming up again next month. We've got Health is Wellness with Nicole. Stay open for your cannabis medical card workshops in Florida, other states with our guy DJ. CJ is going to be taking over for our procurement program. We've got the expungement clinics coming up, and all of this is building up for MJ BizCon. If you haven't got your ticket yet, please get your ticket. If you only do one conference a year, make it MJ BizCon, but don't just come with a suitcase. Come with a plan, come with an initiative, and come with a vision, because I assure you, you will have the opportunity to at least be within touching distance of that person who may be at the top of the position that you're trying to get, or the industry or the company you're trying to get in with. So be sure to continue to follow us. I want to shout out to Zion running our tech support. So my son Zion, man, I appreciate you. You really came through in the clutch today. You killed it as always. And also thank you to Miss Roz McCarthy.
Oh, yeah.
Roz, we want you to know, shout out to Black Buddha Cannabis. If you haven't followed, if you haven't seen it, you haven't heard, there's a new brand on the block, and it is known as Black Buddha Cannabis. It is an enlightened brand, Black, female owned, operated, and inspired. See, Roz, when she created the brand, she didn't just want to say, hey, there's a cannabis brand. She created a brand with vision. She created a brand with intention, and it reflects on the products. So check your local dispensary, see if they're carrying Black Buddha Cannabis. If they aren't, be sure to follow Black Buddha Cannabis on Instagram and tag your favorite dispensary on their page. So that's it, ladies, gentlemen, everyone else. Again, my name is Stanley Atkins II, also known as the Canamedic. I am your National Director of Hemp Farming and Technology with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Thank you for tuning in to Sow the Land. And until next time, be safe, be kind, and stay motivated. We love y'all. Peace.
Appreciate it. Love y'all.